Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are going to actually start working with queries. Now, queries, again, is when you ask GraphQL for some data. Inside, on the right hand here, the great thing about the playground is it will offer some autocomplete features, meaning that as you start typing, it will tell you what options are available to you. The format that we define our GraphQL always comes in the form of either asking for a mutation or a query. So to begin, when we're asking for data with a query, there are only the ones available to you inside of this section of query on your schema. Because somebody who wrote the GraphQL server needs to define to you explicitly what you can ask for and how you can ask for it. So here, if you ask for collections, then it will give you back an array of collections. So I need to start by saying, I'm going to give you a query. And this query is going to request from you collections. Now, as you type, you will notice that GraphQL will give you hints, meaning that these are the only things that you can ask for. This is what you'll get back if you query, depending on the one that you ask for. Collection singular is asking for one collection, which we'll talk about after. Collections array gives you back all of the collections that match. And then get collection by title, you get back a single collection, but you have to tell it the title of the collection you're looking for. Now let's talk about the first one, collections, because I don't want to talk about variables yet before we even work with everything. Here, collections matches the one that you see here, but you saw this warning. Collections of type collection must have selection subfields. So this is telling us, hey, you can't ask for this query unless you tell me what subfields you want on this collection. What are the subfields? Well, those are going to be those keys on the actual type that I want to include. So to begin, let's say I want the ID, and I also want the title. So by typing it out like this, if I now make a request, I get back this object. So this is the structure. As I mentioned, it looks object-like, but there's no fields to it. It's just the keys. There's also no commas. So I'm saying, hey, give me a query on the collections query. And when you give me back the data, I want the ID and the title on that data. Now here, once we hit play, you'll see that this is a top level JSON object. So it's an object where inside it contains a field data that contains all of our data, again as an object. And inside is the name of our query. That name is going to correspond to an array which contains all of our different collections with an ID and also with the title. If I wanted more, let's say I wanted the items as well. You'll notice now that there's this little red signature on the side here because this again represents that there's an error that we have. And similarly to what we had before, I have to give it a subfield, meaning that if I'm asking for items, what are the fields I want from the items? Now, from the items, again, we can open up the schema. And let's say that for now, I just want the name because I need this schema in order for me to reference. It's hard to remember what everything will be. So always jump between the schema and your actual query. And let's say I just want the name from the items. Now, if I rerun my request, for each of my collections, I get back the array on the items where I just have the name. If I also wanted the ID and I also wanted the price, I can easily add those in. And once again, I get back my values. Checking the schema, are there any other values that I might want? There might be the image URL. So again, it's very easy to forget what kind of values you have on your data. And always, always use the playground when you're composing and writing out your queries and your mutations or anything inside of GraphQL. Because when you're trying to do it inside your application, you're not going to have the schema. You're not going to be able to test out your calls. That's the beautiful thing about the playground is that this is essentially where you build out your asks from GraphQL. So far, our query has been made to all of the collections. But we can also, when you look at my schema here, you'll notice that I created another query for you where you can get back a singular collection. Looking at this signature, you can assume that because I'm asking for an ID, you're going to get back a singular collection that matches that ID. So let's test out this new query. First of all, looking at the signature, you can tell that I'm asking you for what looks like a parameter of ID that must be of the ID type. And it's necessary that you give me that ID, hence the exclamation mark. So how do we write this out? Well, first off, in order to get the ID, we have to pass this in as a variable. And as I mentioned down here, you'll notice that it says query variables. So in order to pass it a variable, you pass it as a JSON object. So there's an outer object, and what do we need? We need an ID. So here you're just going to state this is an ID, and the ID value that we're going to give it is going to be of one of these IDs. So I want to use this one for the hats. So I'm going to copy this top level ID for the collection. Make sure you don't get one for the item. And then we're going to pass it as a string. And now when you hover over it, it says variable ID does not appear in any GraphQL query. So again, the playground is trying to help us. It's true, we have not actually used this variable inside our query. So to do this, let's go back into our schema so that we can understand how to build out this query. To begin with, at this top level, any of these variables you want to pass at that top query level to tell it these are going to be the variables that are referenced inside of the query. To begin with, you are going to put a $sign for all of these parameters. So for us, we only have one parameter, so it's going to be $ID, and then you're going to tell it the type. The type is going to be an ID, like this. And now, if you hover over it, there's another error. It says variable ID is not used. So this is where you define the entry point for your variables. Down here is where you define the usage of those variables inside of the actual specific query you're making. Because again, right now, the query thinks that we're still trying to make a collection query. If I call this one collection, I can now open this up, pass it an ID parameter, and then I'm going to put colon to tell it which variable to use. And the variable is $ID. Now here you'll notice that we are still getting an error. If you hover over it, it says variable $ID of type ID used in position expecting ID exclamation. The reason for this is because GraphQL inside of this query, we're saying that this ID you must receive, meaning that there must be a matching variable being passed in. So this cannot be optional. So you have to similarly make sure that you identify that this type for this ID variable is also mandatory. And now you'll see the error go away. So again, the query top level is where you identify, I am going to give you some parameter from a variable, which is down here. Once it's inside, it has this type. And this ID you can now use similarly inside of your corresponding query so that you can pass that value into it. And here you will now see that when we make this request, we get back just a singular collection. Again, we still have the same shape. There is a data, and then there is a collection key. And on the collection key is the JSON object of our matching ID, which was the hats collection with all of the same items because we've kept the same shape. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that the reason why on the data, this is under this key collection is because technically speaking, you can make multiple requests. We're only requesting one collection here, but we can actually request for multiple collections or completely different queries altogether. We can make that same request we had earlier for collections, and inside of collections, we can actually copy the exact same structure that we had for our data. This is a valid query. If you ask for it now, you'll notice that still we have our data. We have the collection that we asked for up here. But if you reduce this, notice that we're also now getting all of our collections. So just something that I wanted to point out. But here we have both of our queries. So now that we know how to play around with the GraphQL library, you can go free and try out the playground yourself. Make some requests, see how it works, look at the structure. because this structure is going to be identical to the ones that we need to make inside of our React application. And now that all of our libraries are finished installing, let's go back in the next video and actually work with the library. I'll see you in the next video.